Good morning. All right, so I just want to let you guys know I have another great person here to speak with us about some of the different things that are happening in our STEM Story series and sort of working with CS. So I have with me Mr. Christopher Mulyan, and so he is actually someone that is a really great experience, has a lot of really good experience for us to talk about today. And so I'm going to let him introduce himself and the work that he does in his particular role. So what is it that you are doing, Chris?
Hey, so I'm Chris Mulyan, currently working for Ring, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, as a technical program manager for security. And what that means is if you look at your Ring doorbell or your Ring cameras, Ring Spotlight, all those products, I'm the guy that's responsible for making sure no one can hack those products.
Nice. So we are glad you exist. Definitely. As many Ring doorbells as I've seen lately. So one of the things, Chris, we really like to talk about starting the conversation is just really thinking about the idea of your sort of STEM story, right? So learning about Chris, who is Chris? Who are you, Chris? Where does Chris come from? How did Chris get interested in sort of doing the work that he does?
So where I come from is always a complicated answer, because I'm not, my background's not very traditional. I wasn't born in the States. I was born on an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean called the Azores, or a group of islands called the Azores. My mom was military. My dad was military, but I didn't live there long. I moved back to the States, grew up in San Antonio, and then moved to Louisiana. I would say my affinity and introduction to STEM started with me just paying attention to like NASA missions. As a kid, I was so fascinated with NASA. I was fascinated with the idea of space. I was fascinated with the technology that came from space. I remember when they had, just completed one of these moon missions, lunar missions, and they had come up with Bluetooth technology. I remember that. And then there was also like this gel that they came up with called aerogel that they would show on TV how you could take a flame and put the flame directly underneath the gel, and they had an ice cube on the top side of the gel, and the flame underneath the gel, and the ice cube wouldn't melt. And that's how, the thermal properties of that gel was so crazy. And this is all just stuff that came through space exploration. And so I was just really fascinated with that. Then we got our first computer. It was a Gateway, all-in-one box computer. A lot of people may not know about that. So the 999 computer. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. I remember the first night we got it all set up. I was playing on it, and I crashed Windows. And at the time, it was like Windows 95 at the time. And so I literally stayed up all night trying to fix the computer, because I knew if my mom found out that I crashed Windows the first day and we got that computer, it was over for me. And that was my hardcore introduction into STEM, because when I realized that I could fix that computer, then I was hooked. And so from that point forward, I was interested in building computers. I had a curiosity about how they build laptops. And so that was where my mind was at for when it came to STEM. And there's a lot of, down the line that my love for computers is what just drove me into a lot of different things in STEM. But that's kind of where it started.
Nice. So it sounds like it, but I want to make sure. I got to ask the question, were you able to fix it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Several times. Because I broke it several times.
And that's really great, because I think that exposure you just talked about, that out of having a moment where you actually had to sort of, sink or swim in some ways, or really sort of dive in, and you had a purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have the motivation.
The right motivation.
That got you there. That's a great story to sort of think about that. And so that's really, really wonderful to know. Mm-hmm. And I also wonder, thinking about that same thought process, do you feel like having that idea, that desire is one thing, but do you feel like it was nurtured? And so I guess asking this question this way, where was that nurtured? Was it in school, or was it outside of school, or if it was at all?
So my love for computers and STEM actually wasn't really nurtured in school. I think the school systems that I grew up in just didn't have enough different material or challenging enough material to nurture that love. That love was nurtured from my mother, because my mom, she was a computer operator in the Navy. She did a lot of classified work, and she had a love for computers. When we came to Louisiana, she worked at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, which used to be called USL, University of Southwestern Louisiana. And she was a computer operator there. And so I would come with her to work, and I would see what she would be doing on the computers. And she always had to reprogram the printers, because the printers would go down, and so watching her sit behind a black screen with all this code and text and pressing codes and commands. And I'm like, well, what does that do? And there's a whole command book that does this and that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that helped to nurture, this idea of, okay, computers aren't scary. They're really just, you give it a command, it's going to do something, and so I translated that into my own knowledge of trying to learn, okay, what commands can I do with the computer? And, we had 56K dial-up internet, so I would spend a lot of time on the internet just learning about computers, like how they work, what commands they run. I was the first person in my house to figure out, what our TCP IP address was, and what that even meant, and how to hide it, if you wanted to. So yeah, it was really through my mom.
Okay. And that's always that question, right? So a desire is one thing, but where does it get nurtured? And so as we're thinking about this, the audience of this sort of space here is really those teachers and educators and also students to say, hey, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom. It could be other spaces as well. And so thinking about it now, sort of giving a quick summary of a lot of the accomplishments that you have done, even in your short career so far, and the idea that you have your role now as the technical program manager, but that's how where you started, right? Mm-hmm. So you've had sort of a circuitous road, a sinuous road as well, a circular space that's happening too. So can you talk to us a little bit about where you started and then sort of where you've ended up now and sort of that journey that's happened there?
So let me just tie it all in together, right? So my love for computers ended up leading to me building 9 computers before I finished high school. And then by the time I finished high school, I decided I wanted to go into physics because I thought, that would help me understand computers even more. Going to physics, because I needed a scholarship, I ended up taking on a dual degree program. And, I originally wanted to do computer engineering, obviously, because I wanted to build computers. But then someone told me electrical engineering was the same as computer engineering, but it paid more at the time. So I was like, oh, well, shoot, I want to make money, So I chose electrical engineering. Fast forward through a very tenuous college matriculation to my job. And the very first role I got out of college was actually doing industrial automation, which is a field I didn't even know existed. And in that field, I had to learn how to program in 5 different languages in a month. I was working on projects for these huge manufacturing facilities like Hershey's. I worked at the Hershey's plant in Pennsylvania, helping to keep their automatic line going. I was responsible for programming the hardware that controlled their automation line. I worked at the DuPont plant in Pennsylvania as well. I worked on some military applications. I worked on an application that made cigarettes, all these different things, which was kind of like a crash course in hardcore programming and having to learn how to program in different languages. I moved out of that, transitioned into aerospace and defense because of my love for NASA. Oh, by the way, while I was in college, I also did 4 internships for NASA. So I kind of got my fix in aerospace, but definitely knew I wanted to go back to it. So fast forward past my first job doing automation, I move into a role as a test automation and software development lead. And that's where my very first project I worked on, I wrote the test software for all of the test stations that we use to put a weather sensor called VIIRS into space. So if you ever see images on TV or on your computer of Earth at night, that was the satellite, the sensor that I worked on that took that image. And I was responsible for testing all aspects of it. So at this point, I can say I helped to put a sensor into space. I worked on that for 5 years. Then I moved on to another project where I can't really talk much about it, but let's just say it's used to help protect the warfighter, and it was used to save a lot of lives. moved back into aerospace and defense and worked on the next generation of missile launch detection and tracking and surveillance space sensors. So right before I went to Amazon, I worked on testing our next generation missile launch and detection system that's going to go into flight in 2 years. They're going to launch in 2 years. So I was responsible for building the test equipment and programming all of that as well. So fast forward now, kind of like chasing a difference in my, just difference in career and pace. I went on to Amazon and started working in the Ring product line. Initially as a firmware TPM or technical program manager, and I was really just managing new software releases and updates and new features for all the Ring products. But they quickly caught on to my knowledge of security, internal embedded security, and how to protect our devices. And the processes, what I found to be very important is having good processes to implement things so that you can scale as your company and your product lines and the different things that you offer grow. And so they tapped me on the shoulder to kind of run that. And so within the last 3 months, I went from a firmware engineer to now responsible for security for all of our products at Ring, all devices at Ring. So that's what I do now.
Wow. So wow. I think that's a really great sort of explanation of the pieces and parts that have helped build to the point where you are now. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, in that sort of journey of it all, did you see yourself utilizing, and you sort of touched on this a little bit at the end there, did you see yourself sort of utilizing those STEM-based skills from each job to each job and sort of transferring them across the line? And did you notice, obviously, were there differences in what was required based on that role that you were doing?
Absolutely. So I never saw myself as a programmer, even though I loved computers and wanted to build computers and fix computers. I never saw myself as a programmer. But my very first 2 jobs, I spent the first, I would say, 6 years of my career programming in multiple different languages, and also learning how to code, not just for web-based or computer-based applications, but also learning how to write firmware and embedded code so that you can actually control devices and hardware. So that was a direct correlation to what I learned in college and my love for computers, and just my understanding of how computers work was so pivotal in me understanding how to get hardware to work, because it was the same problem solution, investigation tactics that I would use, as well as basic principles. Fast forward to like when you take on engineering, you learn how to problem solve. Right. And I think as an engineer, especially early career engineer, you're not getting paid. People aren't hiring you to be the best, electrical engineer, to know the most about integrated circuits, or, to know the most about, programming. They're hiring you because you have learned the fundamentals on how to solve problems, how to take complex problems and break them down into simpler problems that you can solve and ultimately solve the big one. That's what I do every day for the project management that I do. I'm literally, like, if you go back to the space sensor that I had to test, I had to serve as the electrical engineer, the computer engineer, the hardware engineer, the safety and quality engineer. I had to serve in all of those roles. I had a team, of people that I was managing that would give me reports on all those different areas for this test station, because it had to do all of that, right? And I had to know enough about it to be able to say, oh, no, that doesn't sound right, or maybe we need to push here. And that came, and I only have one engineering degree. Like, my degree is in electrical engineering and physics. So how was I able to talk and kind of give guidance across all those different realms? That's the beauty of engineering. Like, the beauty of studying STEM is that the foundations and the fundamentals that you learn are relevant across all the STEM majors. Logic is logic, when you learn computer logic and you take those little math classes, your Boolean algebra class, and you learn how to solve proofs. You never think that stuff is going to matter until you actually have to write an algorithm where it heavily depends on you having sound logic. And when you're doing stuff for aerospace, or you're doing stuff that's going to go into space and you can't get it back, and you can't send someone, so you can't just go call someone and say, hey, can you go fix that? You got to get it right the first time. So I would say in almost every aspect of my life, I use my STEM background. Definitely at work, I would not be successful without it.
Yeah. So switching gears just a little bit, to get to know a little bit more about Chris himself. So thinking about this, have there been any challenges that you've had to face or opportunities that have been sort of the markers to sort of push you in one direction or another, sort of stemming from either who you are or what you've accomplished or what you're doing, and those thought processes there?
Yeah, the challenges is an understatement. So I start off with saying I grew up poor. I'm the only one in my family to go to college. Well, I'm the only one in my family to graduate from college. I put it that way. My mom did go, but she didn't finish. So I didn't have money to even get into college. So that was my first hurdle, was just getting, paying for college and getting through college. My second hurdle was, while I was in college, learning to manage my time effectively and learning what my limits were. I started off wanting to do everything and get involved in everything. And I was able to do that initially while I was at Morehouse. But once I transferred to Tech, I didn't realize that, by going to school every semester and working over the summers, doing internships, I was slowly burning myself out. And so by the time I got to Tech, after my first year, I did horrible. By my second year, I had to sit out. At the end of my second year, I got put on probation because I burnt myself out. And it was so bad that I wouldn't even go to class. I wouldn't even go take tests. And I attribute that to just me always thinking that, academically, I was always like one of the, I won't say the smartest person, but I always did well academically. That was always the area that I knew I could always succeed in. And so I never experienced failure. And that was a very pivotal moment for me, failing or having to sit out at Georgia Tech for those 6 months, because I had to grip with the idea that I had failed and what was I going to do about it. So recovering from that and the journey to recover from that is a whole nother story. But let's just say I got through those 6 months of sitting out. I came back and I knocked it out the box. It turned out I just needed a break, right? And once I took that break, I was good to go. But that created its own challenge because now my GPA was horrible. And, this is back in the time where GPA still mattered to everyone. It didn't matter what you've done. It didn't matter. I had 4 internships with NASA. My GPA wasn't great. So it was really difficult for me to even get my first job. And for me to land a job in aerospace and defense, that was a blessing. That was me being at the right place at the right time, talking to the right person. But because of that, I found a mentor in the person that brought me into my aerospace and defense job. So I worked at Raytheon. The guy that helped me get on ended up being a mentor for me throughout my entire career at Raytheon. He's the reason why I got promoted 3 times in 6 years at Raytheon. He's the reason why I got to do a rotation program, and I got to speak all over the United States doing, helping other students and students and college students and high school students understand what it takes to get through the process, and was involved in helping our own company change their perspective on GPA. So we gave a presentation at a NASB conference that caused Raytheon to change their perspective on GPA. So, yeah, tons of challenges.
So I want to sort of stick to what you were just talking about there, because I think that's also another area that we want to explore during this time, is this idea of sort of that, while this is a GPA requirement, that oftentimes really does affect a lot of the diversity pieces that happen as well. So did you have any challenges or things of that nature, or I guess experiences with that, being a person of color in the tech industry in general, or in a STEM industry as well, in those thought process?
Yeah, so especially going into aerospace and defense. So first, just this, with the whole GPA thing and my experience, it made me feel like I wasn't as techie as I thought I was, right? So now I'm walking into the aerospace and defense industry, which is a older white male industry. If we're just going to be completely honest, it is predominantly older white male. Now that has changed drastically in the last 2 to 3 years, because the demographic of people and people retiring has changed. But when I came in, that's what it was. And so in that industry, you have to earn your stripes. If you look young, because technically I wasn't as young as the rest of the people coming out of college, because I did a dual degree program. But I looked young, so people didn't really respect me. I didn't even know, I didn't even trust my own technical abilities until I actually started sitting in these rooms and having these conversations with these people that I thought were like the geniuses of their fields, and then finding out, oh, well, no, there are some areas where I can actually add value. And then, then you start seeing, oh, there are tons of areas where I can add value. Where I start seeing the majority of my challenges is when I got promoted to lead roles. Now I'm having to lead, teams of people that are way older than me, that have been in the company for way, 10, 20, 30 years in some cases. And, how do I convince someone who has been doing their job a certain way for 20 years that they're doing it wrong? And I'm just some young looking, they think I'm fresh out of college, don't really know what I'm talking about. Those were some of the biggest challenges that I faced, was just ageism. I would say where I faced other challenges for being a Black was when I, regional, like when I left the, West Coast and came to the South to work. That was a very interesting experience where people kind of expected me to, one, not be in the role that I was in, and two, they kind of expected me to just kind of do whatever my white male leader says, even if I don't agree with it. And that just didn't work out for me. I would say in other ways, I had to get used to being the only Black engineer, right? I mean, if you look at where I'm at now at Ring, there are very, very, very few Black people in general. And I am definitely the only Black TPM, technical program manager.
And how does that, sort of even talking a little bit about that, what sort of effect does that have? What challenge does that present, I guess?
I would say earlier on, the challenge is that it's a lonely place and you don't know who you can talk to, who you can trust. You don't know if people are actually have your best interest in mind. But I've kind of learned to get past that, because, that it just is what it is. So I stopped worrying about whether, I stopped worrying about that being the case and started trying to change that on my own. So getting involved in ways to bring more people that look like me into these industries and into these roles. But ultimately at this point, that's just the state of the industry right now. And I think it's our job and my responsibility to change it. If I don't like it, change it. And so the challenges that I have, I don't really see. I'm not going to say people don't still see me as, the Black person that maybe doesn't really know what he's doing and all that other stuff. But I've been in those situations so many times, and I've proved those people wrong so many times that it doesn't even bother me anymore. It's like, okay, if I'm telling you the sky is blue and you think the sky is green because you think I don't know what I'm talking about because I look young and I'm Black, I'm going to just wait, until you realize the sky is blue. And I'll let you realize it. And you can come to me and tell me the sky is blue. And I'll be like, oh, wow, you're right. The sky is blue. You're so right. I don't care. At this point, it's not even about ego. If you want to have that, you can have it. It won't stop me. It hasn't stopped me. And what I have learned is just emotional intelligence and learning how to navigate those situations has been very, very beneficial in my success and growth in my career, because you're going to have to deal with that regardless.
And you mentioned a piece about sort of being a lead and sort of doing some of that work to bring other folks in. Mm-hmm. Hadn't seen any challenges in doing some of that work or trying to backfill or bring in more folks in that space?
Oh, definitely. I think the biggest challenge that I see is, one, companies just not being serious enough about changing their demographics. Two, people thinking that recruiting Black people in STEM is the same as recruiting, other ethnicities in STEM. For instance, you'll have a team that, will say, hey, if I send 5 people to go recruit at a UCLA engineering career fair, I'm going to get, 30, 40 candidates, right? And they might all be white or they might all be Asian, but that is a huge ROI. Why would I send 5 people to, North Carolina A&T and only get 4 candidates? I don't like that ROI, right? And I've had to explain that recruiting at a PWI school, predominantly white institution, is not going to be the same as recruiting at an HBCU. As Black people, there's a lot of culture that comes into how we respond and how we interact with each other. Like, you can't just not talk to us at all, not care about us at all, and then just show up on our doorstep one day and be like, hey, we want you, and us take you seriously. You have to build that relationship. And so that's what I've been working with, trying to convince and working with the different companies that I've worked with to go more and go above and beyond into building that relationship, building that trust, and creating that pipeline. Once you do that, then you can start bringing the people in. That's one. The second step is, okay, creating an environment to where these people, once you bring them in, they like it. You know, they want to stay. Because I've been at companies where I literally told my manager, hey, you're going to lose your entire team. And you're like, nah, what are you talking about, Chris? You don't know. What are you talking about? I was like, well, okay. Well, I'm telling you why I'm leaving. And I'm going to tell you now, you're going to lose everybody. And they lost everybody. And it's for the reasons I told them, because there was no focus on making sure that these people felt comfortable there. They didn't see any potential for career growth. They didn't see how they fit into this company, right? And so that's some of the challenges that I've seen so far.
Okay. And so my last two questions are more sort of education focused, school focused in that way. So just thinking about that idea of even building out that pipeline, thinking about your experience as a student, what would you want to have teachers know about your role and your work, and or what would be sort of an ideal thing that they would need to focus on or would want to implement to try to create opportunities or spaces for students like yourself that would want to try and help fill that pipeline, right? Because again, it's not, most of them are not necessarily computer scientists, right? But how do you nurture that, or how do you build that out in a student in that way?
We have to balance theory with tangible learning, hands-on learning. In the STEM field, like unless you're going off to PhD and do research and stuff like that, most of your career, most of your job, you're going to actually have to sit down and do something, right? Like as an engineer, I have to build something, I have to fix something, I have to create something, right? So all of the theoretical stuff, all of the theory that we learn and concepts that we're taught in school, that's great, but make us put it to use. You know, like there's no reason why in my math class I don't do a math project. There is opportunities for me to do math projects. In CS, you know, like if we talk about programming, you know, we do a lot of just writing code. Okay, let's do a tic-tac-toe puzzle. Let's do that. That's great. Do you want to know where the biggest deficit is when it comes to programming? People that know how to program hardware. Right? One of the biggest issues that we have is that we have people that know how to program really well. We have people that know how to design hardware really well. We have no one that knows how to put the two together. Right? So I see a huge opportunity in introducing that earlier on in the classroom to say, hey, you're not just going to do a tic-tac-toe program or a grocery store program. You're also going to, hey, control this robot. You're also going to learn how to program an Arduino board and have that Arduino board do something. That type of learning, that type of education, I think opens the door for a lot more opportunities in STEM, because now you're taking these kind of like conceptual things and you're turning into practical examples of things that we need to do now, that we need now, solving problems that exist now. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And then that next question was just sort of, we're going on this, what we consider sort of our 1, 2, 3 to be idea, right? Mm-hmm. So what would you tell students who are interested in what being a technical program manager per se, mm-hmm. what would be those 3 to 4 steps that they would need to complete to become a technical program manager?
Okay. So to be a technical program manager, that is a very interesting role. There's no way to be a technical program manager and not be experienced. So there is no coming straight out of college and becoming a technical program manager. First, you need to have a strong technical foundation. So you need to spend some time doing some design work, doing some problem solving, you know, fixing some things, creating some things on a technical basis. Like you need, you know, get some work and some hours and some grit in there. 2, you need some experience managing a project from start to finish. So now you've seen the technical design side. Well, how much does this project cost? What's the timeline? How does what I do fit into the broader timeline? And how do I make sure everything that I do is going to hit the schedule that I need? 3, managing people, right? So It's one thing to be able to control your own time and manage your own schedule, but it's another thing to say, oh, okay, I have a team of people that have to come together. They're all working on different aspects of something, but I need to lay out the schedules, have them all commit to this, have them all commit to their own piece of the pie, and get it all done in time within the budget that we say we're going to commit to, and then present that finished product. Those are the three experiences that you have to have, and you have to put them. When you put those three together, you've now created a technical program manager.
Okay, nice. And then as we end, the last question I always ask here is just making sure that a lot of times people, especially students, will think that your career is the only thing that you have any care of, or the only thing that you really care about, the only thing that you do. So what is Chris interested in or passionate about outside of being a technical program manager?
So that's funny. So I still love computers. So I was helping one of my mentees build his first computer. Outside of that, travel. I probably love travel more than anything else. And I'm not one of those people, because, everyone says, oh, I love to travel, right? But I actually travel a lot, pre-COVID, especially through work. If you combine my work travel and my personal travel, I'm probably out of the country 4 to 5 times a year on a plane, probably spend at least a month or two somewhere else, out of the year. So I'm traveling a lot. Big deal for me. I love to be around the people that I care about. I love to be around my friends. My friends are very inspiring. So just listening to their stories and how they're progressing through their careers, that's a big deal for me. Let's see, I'm a little bit of a cooking connoisseur. So when I do have people that I want to impress, I'll whip out new dishes and stuff like that and cook different things. Things that I used to do. I live in LA. I play volleyball. I played beach volleyball for like 5-6 years. It was a lot of fun. Not in shape to do that anymore, but that was definitely a passion of mine. Outdoors. I enjoy being outdoors. I love beautiful scenery. I love being near the ocean. I went up to Yosemite recently. I went up to Big Bear and Lake Tahoe. So those are all, areas I like to camp. I did kayaking for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So there's a lot of different things that I like to do outside of work. Work is fun. I enjoy it, but it's not even my passion. My passion is to be a life coach. So even while I'm at work, I'm, helping people figure out how to get from where they are to where they want to be. That's what I love to do.
Yeah. And I love asking that question because, again, it's this idea that all of our experiences and the things that we love to do can feed into the work that we do, right? But just like you mentioned, the idea of how do you get people from one place to where they want to be. It's a great piece. And just because you do a job does not mean that's the only thing that makes. And so I think that's a really good question of why I always like to say, so what is it that you do outside of this thing? Because also there's sort of the thought process that I'm not a computer scientist, so I can't do that, or I'm not interested in that. So what does that look like? When, as we've seen in the last few years, sort of people coming from all different backgrounds into the tech space, because those things are needed and their perspectives are needed as well. So thank you, Chris, for this time frame. I appreciate you for sharing with us. No problem. And thank you for your time.